I would say I'll do my intro and I bet people will file in during it if we're good with that. Hi, everyone. I'm just here to do a brief intro. I hope you really enjoyed yesterday. It's nice to see you all again. I'm going to do an intro. So, Nicole Richard is going to be presenting on the evaluation subgroup outcomes and goals. Nicole is a research associate and food safety specialist with the University of Rhode Island's College of the Environment and Life Sciences.
Thank you. So it's funny, we were just talking about cats and
She knew.
She
knew.
I know. She heard it. And then as your cat's walking in, my daughter's walking in the back of the room I'm in. I'm like, get out, go. Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm Nicole Richard. I'm with the University of Rhode Island, and I've been chairing the evaluation work group. Today, I'm just going to talk about where we're at with the evaluation. So what's the problem? I just wanted to briefly review, how we got to where we are with this work group. So basically what we were finding was some of the less experienced small and medium scale food processors appear to be struggling the most when they take this FSPCA Preventive Controls for Human Food training. And they have more challenges when they're developing and implementing food safety plans. So in other words, we want to think about, what are some of the knowledge and resource gaps that are impeding less experienced processors in developing and implementing a food safety plan. So the summary of this project, the overarching goal of the Preventive Controls for Human Food work group is to provide technical and educational development and support to address the needs of small and medium scale processors towards compliance with the Preventive Controls rule. So in order to do this, we need to identify knowledge gaps that are contributing to the difficulties encountered by this target audience when they take the FSPCA Preventive Controls training. So our audience, we're going to focus our efforts on, our indirect audience is the food processors impacted by the rule, primarily the less experienced small and medium scale processors, or those that may or may not come under the full impact of the rule. So in order to do this, we're going to target our efforts at the FSPCA Preventive Controls for Human Food lead instructors by developing an evaluation tool that we can use, that we can distribute to the instructors for use to assess this audience. So our plan, we're going to develop evaluation tools that will assess background information, knowledge regarding key food safety concepts, and we want to determine what topics they might need more information on. And then by gathering this data, we'll be able to identify supports that are needed by the processors for compliance with this Preventive Controls for Human Food rule. So our approach, essentially, we're going to assess the evaluation tool for usage in the format most preferred. Initially we were thinking we'd have a printed copy that would be distributed to instructors or that they can download from the NECAFS website, but now everything's virtual. So we've developed the tool as a Google form that can be used. And we'll also have a paper format that can be downloaded from the website, but that's not up there yet. So we're going to we developed these evaluation tools. We've determined data sharing, how we're going to share this data with the NECAFS network. And now we're at the stage where we need to promote usage of the tool. So the outputs from this project are the development of the evaluation tool itself. And then by implementing this tool, we'll be able to collect regional evaluation data of the curriculum and hopefully identify what supports are needed by the target audience. And this will tie in with the Roadmap to Resources group in terms of, identifying resources that we know are established, that are good resources, and we can start pointing people into that direction, or determining, what resources do we need out there that this audience could really benefit from. So I just wanted to review what this evaluation tool includes. So it includes information on class format. Is it a 2.5 day in person? Is it the blended course? We ask questions about job function, what foods are manufactured, what's the respondent's experience with the food safety plan development. We assess knowledge regarding key food safety concepts that are presented in the training curriculum. And we ask about what topics they need more information about. And there are a few questions regarding their familiarity with the FSMA Preventive Control for Human Food rule. So the process for using this evaluation, so essentially lead instructors will share a course code with their course. So the format that I thought we could use would be last name and then the date of the course. It doesn't matter if it's the first date or the last date. This is just to make a unique code so that when the data is compiled, we can pull out by class. So for example, Richard 0201 2021. We'll have instructions up so that no one has to remember this. Then the lead instructors can either share the survey link with their class participants or distribute printed copies if it's an in-person class. And then that information will be submitted to NECAFS. So you'll have to communicate with NECAFS that you used the survey, let them know the course code that you used, and that will initiate the emails. So, and NECAFS will provide you with information, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then they'll have your email for that. So on the other side, the process for NECAFS, they'll be receiving this information, they'll analyze the regional data, they'll provide instructors with an evaluation summary of their course, and they'll coordinate with the regional NECAFS network of all of this data. So we'll be able to use it to identify, gaps in resources. So the survey has been developed in Google Forms, and this information will all be shared with you if you don't capture it now. But this is the survey link. It's a short link that will direct you right to the Google form, and below is the QR code for that survey. So we'll be promoting all of this through the NECAFS network soon, and we'll have instructions and everything for you. And upcoming soon will also be the printable survey for download from the website, and it will also include instructions. If you want more information on the evaluation work group, you can contact me. My name is Nicole Richard again, and my email is on that screen, nicolerichard@uri.edu. And thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nicole. Given that we are slightly over time, but just a little bit, I'm going to roll us into our next presentation. So we have the awareness subgroup presentation. Luke Laborde will be presenting with the group's update and next steps, and then Amanda Kinchela will field the Q&A questions for both to answer. Luke Laborde is a professor of food science at Penn State Extension, and Amanda Kinchela is a food extension associate professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst's Department of Food Science. Luke, if you want to jump on in. Do we have, oh yes, there's Luke.
Yeah, I see him here, but
yeah, Luke.
Sorry. Say okay. I didn't get the memo on how I share my screen, or is that what I'm doing? Sharing screen?
If you could, yes.
you
Okay.
are.
All right. Hold on. Sorry. Okay. Okay. And I got it up. Now I will share. I'm not showing my video because I've had some bandwidth problems here, and I'm kind of paranoid about that. Okay, share screen. Here we go. Here we go. Share. Now, can you see that?
We could, and then it went away.
Perhaps I have to go out to this screen. Now, can you see it?
Yep, and then if you want to hit present, it'll go full screen.
Alrighty. Yep, I remember that memo. All right, I'm Luke Laborde at Penn State University, where I'm a professor of food science, and part of this awareness subcommittee. We had a really good presentation on the resources yesterday, but then the question is how do people become aware that there actually are resources out there, and what what do you need to get them interested in finding those resources and the NECAFS network. So the problem that we came up with, this has been over a year in discussion, is that we know that all food facilities are covered under at least some parts of the preventive controls for human food, whether it's the GMPs or the entire so-called HARPC components. And then we postulate that smaller operations, even if they have qualified for a facility exemption, may lack time and resources to acquire basic understanding of how the rule will affect them and how to proactively prepare for compliance. So we know all processors will be affected, except for home processors and things like that, perhaps. So how do we get people to acquire an understanding of how they fit into this whole system of FSMA, and in particular preventive controls? So our overarching goal then was to increase awareness of the FSMA preventive controls rule and target that at the smaller size facilities, which is what NECAFS is all about. So our approach was to, rather than try to reach food processors, which can be very difficult to do, although it still should be done. But we want to identify and seek comments and research and collaboration with food safety communicators to look for the scope of the problem, possible solutions, and build a portfolio of PC awareness communication tools. Then we want to disseminate these materials back to communicators, who in turn will use them to reach out to the people they know in their local area or regional area. Another postulate is that virtual communication is good, but sometimes people want to talk to somebody. And so how do we connect the communicators with the stakeholders? So here's our audience. It's twofold. One is the smaller food processing facilities as defined under FSMA, and also the food safety communicators. Now, just as an example, these are people such as people in extension or consultants, buyers, state and federal regulators, commodity and marketing organizations, food hubs, grocery stores, all the various groups that are out there that interface with the primary audience, the food processing facilities, as well as media. So, excuse me. So here's this is our overarching kind of way we looked at it in different stages, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're in the various stages here, and pretty much all of them right now. First approach was to identify these communicators. So we wanted to reach out and find out, well, who would like to work in this role as becoming a communicator. And again, there's the list of who we might consider to be communicators. The second stage is develop awareness materials. So how do we get the word out? That can be through presentations or print materials, news articles, mailing pieces, and this is in development right now as we get through this. And then stage 3 was actually dissemination, making that making the connection with the food safety communicators. And again, there's the group that we identified. And I would say many of you in this audience are potential communicators. And then into the evaluation at the end, which will be our last stage, and which we put together later. So our progress and plans, as we started to identify food safety communicators, we began with looking at FSPCA lead trainers as kind of the low-hanging fruit. Those are the people that are directly working in this area. And we created this web form, and there's the link on that, and I assume we're going to send this all out later. But this is something where we ask of groups if they're a lead instructor, yes or no. You don't have to be a lead instructor, but we just want to know. And there's different things to go through so that we can we can start to gather who might be in this group. One of the things we want to make clear is this is a first level approach. We're asking people to potentially listen and offer whatever advice and expertise they have. And if they don't have, and then what they may be doing in their area, and if they don't have that expertise, they can go back and find someone else in this network who can help them. So kind of spread it out. So not everyone knows everything, but if we have this network, then we can all share our expertise. And with the initial goal, at least, of finding somebody within your state or region or somebody, especially when we start recommending training and things like that, that people don't want to travel too far. Now, we assume eventually people will be traveling again. So this went out, and we'll be sending this out again. Then we wanted to create awareness materials. Well, on the right is the concept here. Here's the map of the Northeast region that makes up NECAFS. And just looking at these points here that I just kind of estimated, put them in there. So if you look at that and someone asks you a question, well, it's from New Hampshire or something, you can perhaps see what they're doing there, or the person actually you can refer them to that area to see what activities, what training, what resources they might have that have been developed in that area. So this is a kind of a human-to-human connection, which I kind of like that. I mean, anyone who's gone through some kind of IT issue, you're delighted when you actually get a hold of a human being on the phone. Presentations, we will develop a few slides to insert at meetings. If you have grower meetings and there's potentially processors in there, you might remind them that, hey, this is important too, and you might want to have a look at this NECAFS Preventive Controls site. Website, we discussed that yesterday, right? With the various directory of services, the network itself, resources, and funding and training opportunities. And then there's a 1-hour webinar about the preventive controls that will be available too. So this is potentially what this would look like, kind of similar to that directory of laboratories that was developed. But this is, and this is just a sketch here. It'll be further developed. For instance, we're here. I clicked on Penn State, so you can see what might come up. So if someone in Maine gets a call about, let's say, preventive controls for apple packers or mushroom people, well, we do that here. You might click on this, and this is just one name. There's others too, so we'll fill this in. But that's where you could get the name, address, website, email address to link to that person. And you might want to contact them and ask them if they could help out. And we're going to populate this with all sorts of different communicators, kind of color-coded. So what if you want to know who do I contact in the Pennsylvania Department, some regulatory agency in Pennsylvania? Well, we will populate that with the contact. Here we have FDA regulator and we have state regulator. So if you have a specific question you want to talk to someone in the Department of Agriculture or Health Department, you could find it there. Because we know all these regulations are going to be slightly different at a state level. So you can zero in on who you want to talk to. Then we developed a postcard, two-sided, that this postcard is an attempt to reach out to people under various instances where they could, I'll show the front, and there's the back. And what we try to do is give them a real quick ask, like, what's the deal here? What's the challenge? What's the solution? And how you can learn more. And then the purpose of this is to direct people to the website where they can get all the information, where they can get the network, where they can get into the system. QR code there, and also an option that if you have a bunch of these at a meeting or something and you want to distribute them, you could put your own contact information on the bottom. So trying to reach at the local level and then leverage the whole network to get that correct information that you need. So back to the front, there's our front, and these would be, I forgot what the size were, about 4x6 or something like that. I can't remember. One scenario might be that when an inspector goes out on their, doing the inspections, and they come up with some processors they're looking at, they might keep a pack of these in their trunk or something and pass these out. And then this would help that person make that connection to the network. So it kind of facilitates the regulators and the educators, because oftentimes the regulators aren't sure, like, well, let's see, well, it must be someone at Penn State or UMass or something, I don't know. But this would give them the answer right away. And then when the processor has this in their hand, you can't force them to reach out, but this facilitates that. In the back, we have getting started. We have, learn which federal and state regulations affect your business, find training opportunities, contact an NECAFS expert who can guide you through your state's laws and regulations, and ultimately know that you're doing all that you can to sustain your business and keep your customers safe and healthy. So it's a message to do the right thing and no excuses anymore. You can find that information now. Okay. The dissemination, would be to upload materials to the NECAFS website and then distribute these materials to the food safety communicators. And then this is something that this will be this year's goal. Sending out those postcards to either processors directly, that's one thing you can do, but also to these communicators who might have a multiplier effect to get it out. If you go to a meeting, set it on your table, all sorts of opportunities to get that word out. And then ultimately, we'll want to evaluate the extent to which these materials were used by food safety communicators and the processors. We are cautious about finding the impact on processors because that's very difficult to do, but we can evaluate the impact on communicators. Did it help you? Did you get, some questions or something that they might not have otherwise found you, but here they did. Did it improve your relations with the regulators as far as setting up a network to get information out? So that's it in a nutshell. Any questions? So we hope to get these out to people this year.
So Luke, one question we have here is how are you distributing the postcard? Do organizations like the PASA through Food 21 in Pittsburgh, through IFT, et cetera, what's our distribution plan?
Well, that's our plan is to plan this year. We want to identify who these communicators are. So sounds like Dave. This is PASA, which is in Pennsylvania. Yes, we would want to get these out to that group.
Luke, this is Jamie. Yeah, it was just something that I felt,
okay.
I'm not sure who you're sending this out to. I'm involved with all three of these organizations quite extensively, and I haven't seen the postcard.
No.
So I'm just curious how it's getting out there, and if you can, I certainly would hold on to them and pass them out, but I think it's better to reach out to them and get it on their website because that's where most people are doing business. Unfortunately,
Right.
Postcards, unless you're mailing them, but I don't get mail from any of those.
Yes, this is one strategy. The other one would be how do we get word out about that we have a website? There's other strategies as well. This is one that if you're like a kitchen incubator or something like that, have them on to distribute to your people. So there's all sorts of ways to do this, and this is something we're going to be working on this year. But the first thing is to get a hold of the communicators and work with them and say, well, what's the best way to distribute these things? We don't have all the answers right now, but we can certainly do some mailings, and that would. And if anyone, of course, if people have email lists and things like that, we could do a campaign like that as well. But we're trying to look at all possibilities.
Yeah, and I kind of segue into that. So, Jamie, you bring up a really good point of we have some ideas based on kind of what Luke had of how we would distribute this. And the idea would be we would have these postcards and disseminate them all to you as food safety communicators to help do direct reach with the target audience, which is these small processors. But frankly, one of the challenges we have is the pitch here, awkward moment. We've assumed that you all would be into that of could you, would you, like this was our pitch of this is one way we can reach our target processor. But the other part of the conversation, and I don't know if we can do it now or a little bit later, but what are some other strategies that we can use to actually reach the processor? Because they're not coming to the, there's lots of programs and there's lots of resources we're building, but when they get here, what are we going to tell them? Lori, did you have a comment or
Yeah, I mean, did you guys ever think of plugging in and working with AFTO? I mean, their goal is exactly what you're saying, and they're plugged into all the state regulators all over the country. And so that might be a way, and I don't know what they could do, but they have a lot of, they look to do some of that stuff, I would think. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know whether they're an Association of Food and Drug Officials, but it's not just FDA. It's really a statewide type of
Right. Yep.
Group. And so I didn't know. I mean, for example, Nicole can agree or not. I mean, I don't know what she thinks, but in our state, because we have one DOH, because we're so small, but I think that would be something that would be usful to them because they don't want to be the consultants in all of this. So
I completely agree. And I've spoken with our Department of Health, and they think it would be a useful tool for their inspectors to have on hand.
So I'm thinking if you plug into AFTO, mm-hmm. they can get that out around the country.
That's one type of communicator that we would want to, that we can communicate with the communicators through email and all that, and make sure that they're aware of these materials. But yeah, and we've started with the postcard. That's one thing, but there'll be other ways to communicate with the communicators.
Luke, couldn't there be a way that we even look at it from a perspective of getting some sort of link or a hyperlink on some of the folks and some of the organizations that I listed there, to say, if you want to learn more about this, click here, and it takes you to the NECAFS website where they can plug in their information, and then it would be filtered down to each of the different states. And it just seems like that might be a better approach than trying to, do a mailer. I mean,
no, don't get confused. I showed the postcard. That's just step one. That's what we were able to do in this COVID class. But it's going to be communicating with the communicators. And so these are great ideas, and we're going to discuss these this year as to how to get these materials out. But don't get focused on the postcard too much. That's just one way.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess let me take a step back too, just to kind of recap of some, for those that might not have been in yesterday, Beth had kind of outlined our future resource directory of things that we can and will have available for our target users of small and very small processors. But the other on our three prong of, we've got a resource group, and then Nicole talked about the evaluation, right? And then the awareness part of, okay, well, once we have these tools, how do we reach the people? And as we discussed earlier, we're talking about the folks that don't know about us, or the ones that aren't coming to us. So as the tool One is direct contact with the user, and we're hoping with people in this room and the processors, or excuse me, regulators that are actually physically seeing them. The other strategy is so that the postcard is a tool that we could share today, but that's not the only one. But we're trying to build what that strategy looks like. But part of it is balancing of, well, if we got to have a plan, we have to have the stuff ready before we even say come here. Right. So that's kind of where we're building out. So I've been trying to write a few notes here because I think the recommendations you're bringing is super helpful in thinking about who else or what else we want to do. So I don't know, and I guess I'm going to just take pause here for a second and see if anyone has any questions or critical feedback about the general approach of this first. And I'm looking in the chat, or just give, I love that you're all just shouting it out.
Dave, I had a question for the group. The question is, should we be sending this off to secondary parties to distribute, or what's the thought process from people in the room as far as should we be doing it directly from like NECAFS, or should it go through, again, like AFTO and stuff like that, and have them do that, reach out?
Yeah, I guess to add to that, Dave, from the regulators in the room, is it reasonable to have you as the direct contact with processors to say, oh, hey, it seems like there's some more information or resources available for you directly through this network called NECAFS. Here's a card for more information. Is that a reasonable pitch as one way to raise awareness? Is that something field agents would do or can do?
Amanda, this is John Luca with New York State. That's a very good question. That's probably something we should at least touch base with our counsel's office to get their opinion on, at least in New York State. We do provide a list of recognized processing authorities and that type of information to processors, but it's not, it's not steering them one way or another. I guess this wouldn't be either. It kind of restricts it to Northeast states, but that's not a problem. But I would just run, I would like to run it past our counsel's office, see if there would be any issues with that. But if not, I think it's a great idea. We could certainly hand them out.
Okay, yeah, so you bring up a good point, and I think, Laura, you brought up, bring it back to AFTO too, about larger organizational components to that. But the other thing we've been talking about or offline is flipping our paradigm of going to our food safety people and flipping it to other entities where food processors or food businesses are more likely to go to thrive their business and be present in that space, and then have the outreach tools, whether it be PowerPoint slides and or hyperlinks or website components, but advertising to channel them to these resources. And so to that end, as we start thinking about NECAFS and the future working group components, those are some of the things that we're trying to think about. So I'd welcome some comments or feedback on that direction too. Okay, so let me change it to a question that hopefully, is there some untapped networks, organizations that we could use to advertise these types of, again, the postcard's just an example, but to better promote what NECAFS has to offer to address the needs of processors?
What about some of the commodity groups?
Yep.
Like,
Sure.
Yeah,
For American cheeses, for cheese, we've got the American Cheese Society. They have a food safety hub. We can post it there. Dairy Management has a food safety page for dairy processors. That link can get posted there, but I don't know about the other commodity groups.
Yeah, I think that's a great.
And the way this would work then is, Carrie, hopefully you'd sign up to be a communicator. We would send this information to you, and you would pass it on to who you think, give you some ideas about how you could pass it on to your various commodity groups you work with. I work with different commodity groups. This way it gets out to the people who know the best way to get it out in their area or in their field.
I did sign up as a communicator, Luke, while you were talking when Amanda sent that out. So I'm already good to go, and I will do my job.
Hey, thank you, Carrie.
So another suggestion, I don't know. So a lot of our small processors find their way out of restaurants. You know, their best, you know, particularly now, a lot of, like at Hope in Maine, we find people who are making things in their restaurants going into Hope in Maine and trying to launch small business type opportunities from some of the things that they've made. Mm-hmm. So I know this may be a long shot, but like I said, I mean, what about, I think it's important to work with the larger sort of state or the organizations in the state to try to network with folks. So some sort of restaurant organizations in the states, hospitality organizations in every state, letting them know what we do, so that when their folks come to say we have the greatest spaghetti sauce in the whole world and we want to get it out there, what do we have to do? And if we're on there, you know, if they know we exist, they might hopefully work with us to get that information out to the people who are interested in doing those sorts of things. So, you know, those are the places that I think people trust also. So just a suggestion.
Yeah, they would get it out to that group, and then they would get on the network, and they would, this is especially true with restaurant processing, is it may not be a FSMA jurisdiction, but it certainly would be under state regulation. And so they can go to that state, and we know every state is different how they do things at that level. So they might go to New Hampshire or Connecticut or Maine or whatever and find out that person that they can, where they can understand those regulations and actually, you know.
Right, but some of these folks are trying to find these ghost type kitchens to make their product and get it out there as a processor, not necessarily get them out there as a retail person. So just a suggestion that might be helpful.
We'd find the co-packing facilities, and
exactly,
all these are connections. It's a spider web of connections that hopefully will fill in as time goes on.
Laura, you mentioned the restaurant crew. We have a lot of our small dairy processors that sell to distributors that then sell to the restaurant. So I don't know how to reach them, but I wonder if going after some of the distributors for the people they're buying product from might be another avenue to be just sending information out for us.
I don't know, but Jamie.
Well, Jamie, can you give a perspective on that?
That's a rabbit hole. I don't think that's gonna die on the vine. That won't go anywhere. I think that the Linda mentioned really reaching out to the statewide organizations. The restaurant associations. Hell, the National Restaurant Association would be a great place to do this. That is that's hitting every single restaurant throughout the whole entire country. I think that there's a lot of different avenues to go. And I think that if what I would really suggest is maybe some sort of email template that we as communicators are reaching out to the appropriate channels. So, if I run into restaurants all the time that are producing things in the back of the house that ultimately are being used and reused in their own establishment, as well as maybe being sold to the general public. So, there's a few places in Baltimore that I can call out that I know of very well that are doing that, and several in Pittsburgh. So I think that there's avenues that we really need to. I hate to say this, I wouldn't say it's a grassroots, but it's really reaching out to the channels that and having some sort of template of an email that we write, that we explain, this is what this is about. We're just looking for you to put this on your website as a hyperlink that's going to take you to where.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep on saying that you have to have a survey that's going ultimately to the individual states, so the state then knows, oh, here's someone that's reaching out to me. Let me call them. I don't know who that goes to, but I think it also has to be specified that this is not for a for-profit entity. This is really from a nonprofit channel that we are trying to reach out to make sure that people are doing things properly. It is not something that is a get-rich scheme for a bunch of folks that want to go out and inspect and help write a food safety plan. We have that there. We can help you, but that's not necessarily the intent.
Yeah, we worked on the language of that postcard as a start, and we will use that kind of language in other venues, emails and letters and things like that, where we emphasize that we are. I can't remember exactly what it says, and I lost my Zoom connection. But we say we're no cost. We're here to refer you, or right. So we're not trying to sell them something.
I think Kathy wrote in the chat, which is a really good suggestion, I think, is to look at the food policy councils. Now, not all the food policy councils in every state have the same objective. Some of them are different than others. I understand that, but they are there to help direct, and have websites and all sorts of things that people are looking at. So that might be, I guess the whole thing with this conversation, I think, is that we should be looking at sort of organizations, not just because I think this is a great idea, not just the communicators. That's just one path. But I think the other path of the organizations that all these individuals plug into, and as we know, they don't always plug into communicators and cooperative extension. So there needs to be a way to funnel them in that direction. So
so I guess thank you, Lori. And to that end, kind of going back to like the term that Jamie said, this grassroots, and I think that's kind of where we realize, like, they haven't come to any of this stuff now. I mean, we're 5 years into FSMA. We know that they exist. Like, we need a different game plan. So, and this segues into a conversation that we're supposed to have in 20 minutes, but we can be here now. The next part of us is thinking about our working groups, about what we want to achieve for next year. And, we're building the tools now, so we will have a thoughtful portfolio of delivery. But I think for me anyway, having this conversation right now just reminds me of I knew we would have email, but we did not communicate to you all we had planned we will have spoon-fed components. Email is one, PowerPoint slide if you're doing a public, one slide at the front and or end of the back end to show people. But if you could think of any other outreach campaigns, and or if we need funding to do this. So to that end, the Specialty Food Association that Carrie had mentioned, that's been something that Luke and I were talking about. But we were thinking, like, go bigger, get a table at that space, or penetrate into presenting and working with that group to be present. But if there's any other of those types of entities, I'd welcome them in the chat or in this discussion, because it's really helpful for us to kind of lay out how we can think about this for the future work of the awareness.
I think we'll be sending out some emails to you that are here and others as well, as
Draft.
if more ideas come up and if you have other suggestions. Or you can join the awareness group and meet regularly with us as we craft this. Mm-hmm. We really need that full feedback so we don't go off track.
Yeah, I'm looking here too. Kathy, you had the John Hopkins Center for a Livable Future. I'm not familiar with that group. Can you tell me about the scope of that?
It's in their, I think it's in their School of Public Health, but it basically looks at food from a food systems perspective. And I mean, they support the food policy councils, whether you're in action or if you're willing to, if you're wanting to start one, they'll take you through the motions. And they have lots of resources on their site, but it's mostly about food systems and how to, what agroecology is and what different things are. But it might, I've reached out to them with the book that I'm writing, and I think it might be a good resource for NECAFS to be part of, because they're very connected with the smaller local food systems.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, eventually they're going to start a business or a product or something like that. And eventually you're going to interface with the regulations. It's going to come. And it'll probably be a surprise to many of them. So at least we'll give them a heads up to the extent that we can.
Yeah.
Luke, can you stop sharing your screen?
Oh, I lost my, I'm having some.
I can't see. I'm thinking that I could see everybody if you.
Yeah, I have like 3 monitors and I can't access the monitor that the Zoom is on anymore. So
You can try to shrink them though, if you have, so you can get a better angle. You can just move Luke's screen over to the side so you can.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know why it's doing this.
Yeah.
But I'll work on it.
So I had also thrown in the chat about the Natural Food Expo, and through the chat, Jamie talked about that there's East Coast and West Coast. And so I was kind of thinking about looking for input here. The East Coast is fine, but the West Coast is the one that like all the cool natural kids go to, right? So
we can't go there, not for NECAFS.
No, we can go there. It's just
like we couldn't.
No, we can. It's just
we could do it, but we can't get funds for that through NECAFS or.
Why? Okay, I guess I'm speaking. When I worked in industry, my East Coast business, we had some of the team go to the East Coast, but anyone that was really trying to make a go of it in the natural category was on the West Coast, and you just bid it. So we'd have to be careful. There's risk to that of. Well, I guess I don't even know. Like, what is it really a risk to have a big party? And what I mean by that is, yes, I serve Massachusetts and New England, but the work and the resources we're providing,
the world is connected.
You have to just say like, oh, California, I ain't talking to you, right? Like, is there?
Well, this is an interesting point about, and this has happened with the water map and all that. That someone develops something regionally, and then other people, and then we get it running and work out the kinks and all that. But then it could be expanded to other regions in this consortium here, so that yes, everybody's connected.
Yeah, so I think, and then heck, in East Coast and West Coast, but if there's any other channels that you all know, or, just things that we haven't thought about, or some of the newcomers to this NECAFS community, is there things that we are not doing an effective job at of, we're asking for you to help us spread the word, but is there some things that we're missing that, we need some improvement to help make this effective?
What about small business associations? Each state has a SBA, right? A small business group. And I think they might be at least letting them know this exists to support someone who turns up and says, I want to start a food business.
And you see how this would work is that we don't know the Small Business Development Association in Vermont. I don't know who that is, but the contact in Vermont, the communicator in Vermont would, or at least could look it up and add that to their network. You see how this kind of flows downhill, kind of.
Yep.
I think that's an interesting idea because we have a lot of, especially for new processors that are thinking about starting a business, when they have to write a business plan, they go to these small business associations for help in writing a business plan. And one thing nobody ever considers is a food safety budget, which really needs to be taken into account as you're starting a business. I think the small business associations is a really interesting idea. If we could also put together some type of a cover letter to say, as people are considering a new business, because a lot of times it's these small condiment makers or the small dairy processors, and they never think about food safety. So I think that's a great idea.
I think even hitting it now would be the appropriate time because all these conferences are virtual. So you want to hit California Natural Product Expo, go for it. It's free. or it's really, really cheap. I mean, if they're doing a virtual conference, it's happening in May 24th and through the 27th. Let's get on the agenda. Let's find a way to make that happen. I think that's an easy no-brainer. I mean, why not say, hey, you're looking to start a business, and you're looking to do food processing or anything else that is requiring food safety, click here. I mean, I think that would be a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. We're good at those.
Great. Any other comments or questions or concerns about this? I have a question to John Luker. Who's my person from the regulator groups? We need people right beyond. Like, who do we ask to try to help us with this awareness campaign? And it's recorded. I want names. You're
talking about from New York State?
No, I guess we'll start with New York State, but trying to get an idea of like who is the right contact person or the titled positions to help with penetrating the outreach for this stuff.
I mean, not to throw Kim Berkland under the bus here, but I would think like the MIFRS coordinator in the States might be a good person. As far as the best person by state, I think reach out to AFTO. AFTO has the listing of food and drug officials. You could start by just making the contact at the state level in the food program, and then they would identify the best person to take on that role as contact for the state. I wouldn't be able to do that for other states. I mean, in New York State, it could be myself, it could be Sarah, it could be anybody, that's part of the NECAFS group now.
So, sorry, John.
And I also think the associations, that it was kind of brought up a little bit, but New York State Association for Food Protection, there's New York State Cheesemakers Association. There's all these associations in the state that I think anybody that's in the business of manufacturing of food, and if they're looking to wholesale that food, then they would be, I would think, be very interested in this information.
Mm-hmm.
So Amanda, I know folks at AFTO. John, is Ernie Julian still president, or is he out?
No, Ernie's past president. But you could reach out to anybody on the AFTO website. There are permanent positions working for AFTO. Pat Kennelly from California is very active in AFTO. Joe Corby still, but he's kind of stepped back a little bit. But if you go to the AFTO website, there's the secretarial staff there. It would be a good place to start reaching out to.
Yeah. See, I know some of those people because I have to deal with them for seafood and all of that stuff. So, if you decide that's the way you want to go, we can start reaching out to names, and they will then pass me to somebody else. But we can start.
Okay. Well, I know what I also see is I've been taking notes sometimes when I'm not talking, which is a rarity, right? But I've been taking notes about some of those leads, but I think it might be easier to set up spreadsheets. And if folks can help us kind of build this directory of those parts, then that would be really helpful to get an idea of what our outreach campaign would look like. And then in the meantime, the awareness group will start looking more thoughtfully about some of the other accoutrements for the outreach, specifically the email disseminations and cover letter support components along the line. Luke or Annie, is there anything else that we want to talk about specifically?
Just one thing. Pretty much this group is Amanda and myself and Annie and others who kind of hover around. So anybody who wants to meet regularly and talk about these issues and brainstorm, I'd love that.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that we would love to increase our party to help build the strategy for the awareness group. And to that end, it's not a lot of work, particularly now. So like the postcard, for example, UVM's has a graphic art designer. So Luke did all the narrative, and then but they were able to craft all this stuff relatively quickly. So it's not a terrible amount of work, but having a few extra minds to the group would be really appreciated to make sure that we're thinking outside the box. Okay, any other comments or questions on awareness? Okay, so then I would like to make a shameless plug to just give pause for a second for a few minutes if folks can, if you are interested in being listed as, or I guess we're gonna, I'm making the ask for you to be considered to be a food safety communicator. If you haven't done so yet, I'm gonna put it back in the chat here to fill that out. And then we're gonna transition over to our final conversation, which is long-term planning for working groups and future work needs. Okay, so let's see here. Annie, did you have do we have a Google sheet for that?
Yeah, it's super simple. So let me share that in the chat right now.
Okay, so just to reiterate here, we're in a transition of awareness group coming to a close, but as our parting wish, please take the moment right now to fill out the food safety communicator tool. Please also let us know if there's issues. So for example, Annie, Elizabeth, and Luke, we failed to include West Virginia apparently on our directory, which sorry, we are sorry, West Virginia, it wasn't our intent. But if you know of other folks that would be identified as a food safety communicator, we also would like you to make that ask right now to share it with others so that we can build out a more robust communicator roster so that it will help us more effectively build the directory with the GIS component that Luke was talking about before. Okay, now we're going to transition over to the final topic where we want to pivot to be thinking about the future, and it is, yeah. So give me a second here. I'm just pulling on my notes here of over the past 2 days, we shared the existing working groups. So if you remember, Nicole gave a little summary, a reprise of the 3 working groups we presently have, which specifically is evaluation, awareness, and resources. And that was driven by the conversation that we had with all of you in past NECAFS meetings. But we wanted to take pause and hear back from all of you if to see, do these 3 working groups still make sense? And I'm going to hit you kind of with the hot mess of thoughts, and then we'll channel it a little bit in a moment. But do the 3 existing working groups make sense? And is there anything that needs to be refined as we think about our future? And or is there are there other working group efforts that we should be thinking about? How and why, and what actions do we need to start thinking about so we can create a clear path for the future? So I'm going to give a shout out. Elizabeth, is there anything else that we want to be thinking about in that realm?
No, I don't think so. I think the goal of it is just that NECAFS is going to be writing its proposal for its next 3 years of funding for starting in September. So our current proposal is expired, or we're finishing it up at the end of this year. And so as we think about what it should look like, our proposal for funding for the next 3 years, that's where, in conversations with the PC work group, we've talked about, are there new goals, objectives, activities that the PC work group is interested in undertaking outside of what has been the focus of the awareness, evaluation, and resources, so that we can sort of articulate that in our proposal. And more specifically, if there are specific then costs associated with some of those activities, we can have that information in our budget and listed in our justification. So, I know that this group was really innovative in thinking about the work in these 3 subgroups 3 years ago when this work started. And so now that work is actually, nearing completion and those objectives have been achieved, what's next for this group? I think that's the big question. And is it a continuation of these themes, these 3 subgroups, just with new work, or is it a new area? That's something I think Amanda wanted to try to tease out of this conversation today, so that it can be, even if they're broad thoughts right now, the PC work group leads can kind of help to refine those thoughts into our proposal, but that's the intent behind it and where we hope to take these efforts.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. So I'm sharing my screen right now just to kind of show you where we are, but like yesterday, we just try to have, in the real world, we'd have Post-it note boards and Sharpies, but here we're going to use a Google form. So I guess I wanted to just kind of open up the floor widely. If there's any big thoughts first, just open of what you're thinking about how we currently are organized.
Amanda, I think on the resources, something that we could do is, as we're gathering the resources, it would be nice to do an evaluation of the gaps in our resources, which would identify areas for us to be developing with the next round of funding. As we went through those breakout sessions yesterday and looking at those gaps in environmental monitoring things, and once we pull all the resources together, it might be a good action item for us to very consciously go and look at that at some point once we get that clear, get all of that information together.
Yes.
Identify gaps and a plan to fill in those gaps with resources.
Yeah, and Carrie, that is one of the plans that we have once we have all of the resources pooled, that we will be looking at those gaps. So I think it's great that you bring that up.
Me too. Okay, anything else?
Hi, this is Nicole.
Oh, I'm losing you, Nicole. Is it me?
Talk.
Is it me?
No, Nicole, we can't hear you.
I would say my internet connection's stable. Now?
Yep, now you're good.
Okay. That's weird. It must be where I'm sitting. So I had this really good talk with Lori yesterday, and she's been to the produce side of this conference. I have not. And she was talking about how, there's just a lot of involvement with the regulators. The regulators come and they, there's more interaction with them. And for what we've done with the regulators is just sort of get the overview of what they're seeing in the when they do their inspections. But I think, some of what we were talking about was that it might be beneficial to really start pulling the regulators from all of our states in, because to start to build that, strengthen that relationship. I mean, we all may have strong relationships with our regulators individually, but to build the network with NECAFS might be good. And I don't want to take credit for this idea. It was Lori's, but she said, maybe if it's a virtual component, it might be easier to get a variety of regulators from all different states versus having that in person. But if the big conference is in person, to maybe keep that part virtual, or that might allow for more regulators to attend. So it's just another thought.
That's great, Nicole. Thank you. Did I capture it correctly? I just have a general
Yeah.
comment here.
Yeah.
And we're defining regulators as communicators. So they'll be in that network, hopefully over time, and start to increase more communication.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think too, by including that virtual component, we can also make sure there's room for emerging voices in the field. And I think that could be a really valuable source of insight.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What did you say? How do I enable, what virtual platform enables what different voices?
Emerging voices in the field.
Emerging.
Can you be a little more, dig deeper into what that means?
Just people who either are just getting into the world of food safety or for some reason haven't felt engaged or involved previously. This is a way to sort of dip a toe in the water without the commitment of travel.
Yep.
Great. This is.
We can start developing a list of different organizations that could potentially we could reach out to. I mean, that list, and it has to be done by each state. I don't think it can be done one individual. I think one person from every state has to be involved. And I think that would be an easy ask. I mean, I certainly could do the western side of the state of Pennsylvania and probably all of Pennsylvania for that matter, of different organizations that I feel that are appropriate to reach out to.
Yeah, and we want to get
the national search too.
Yeah, we want to get this sign-up sheet so we get at least one person from every state so that we have everybody covered.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that I think that's a good action item? Would we agree that's more of a awareness type of action item?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. The awareness is the first interface, the first meeting.
Yeah, yes. Forgive, you're all watching me struggle with Google Docs. I don't really, it doesn't have the same formatting, but I'm trying to get. I guess, so I'm a little all over the place. I'm driving. Let me ask you this question though. Do we need all three? Does anyone, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Does the group here feel strongly that these three groups still work for the preventive controls work that we want to achieve to target small processors? And then if you answer, I'm going to say, why or why not, because I want to kind of see if what are the strengths or the reasons why we want to keep them and what work do we want to kind of go in that, or heck no, let's coffee talk. Let's move on to something else. Is that Kathy?
I was going to say, from what I've seen at this conference, all three working groups are at stages where they're completing work. So it might be next year we need to reconsider the groups. But to end them now would be like the resource group's got its website coming, the awareness group's getting its, resources together that then can link to the resource group stuff. And the evaluation group is now getting its evaluation tool out there. I mean, Nicole can say more about whether the evaluation group needs to exist that long, but to me, it seems that we're coming to the end of our projects, and we probably do want to have that in the back of our mind for next year, and maybe that's what we need to think about for the proposal. What's going to come next?
I think one thing that maybe we can add to the upcoming year is getting those regulator contacts for each of our states.
And we talked about either through AFTO but I think people have this knowledge sitting in their state of, oh, this is the guy you want to talk to. Not this guy, he's too high up. So someone who will interface and.
Yeah. Well, I guess one other thing I was curious, from the evaluate, was anyone's, I don't want to say struck's the wrong word, but I found it interesting in yesterday's conversation with the evaluation group about, or not evaluation group, but rather Martin sharing yesterday about the FSPCA is considering upping the ante with assessments. And I guess I want to ask the group, well, I guess two things. I'm not a facilitator. I'm just speaking Kinshall's opinion right now. One is I feel that the 3 working groups we have are still in alignment, and I agree with Kathy. But reflecting on our conversations from yesterday to today, it seems like within the evaluation group, perhaps making a stronger, getting involved closer with FSPCA and what assessments will or are going to be done in the future. Perhaps we need to penetrate that more actively to make sure that the achievements are realistic for the smaller stakeholders as well.
And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but I thought the assessment would be like a quiz, asking them questions to see if they learned something, whereas the evaluation would be asking them separate from that if they learned something, or how do they feel about the program and those kind of things.
Yes, agreed. So I guess this is why I'm kind of having a conversation. This is kind of, if we're going to keep just these 3 groups, but I think it's prudent to have the conversation, and I don't know how this lies, right? But assessments for the FSPCA is trying to indicate that these people actually understand the key concepts of what was delivered, right? Our evaluation is trying to mark more effectively by, Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, instructor and our region and or bigger using the same tools so we can kind of see how effective are we at reaching our audience, right? But they kind of they don't go to, I think they do go together.
That's formative and summative, right?
Oh, Luke, that's true. Oh,
fancy words there.
But does anyone have any, anyone have any thoughts on this? Is this something we want to include?
Yeah, I think so.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, Amanda, so that hopefully
can align.
How we could have some input in what those assessments look like. Not just the evaluations, but I understand the difference, and I think it would be really great if somehow if we put forward that this group is an important group, NECAFS, that somehow that we could act as a review for those assessments, reviewing group, a reviewing panel, I don't know what you want to call it, so that we can give them feedback, especially targeting, like I said, you're right, the small processors. I think we need to keep them in mind when we think about assessments. So I'm hoping they'll let us, like you said, look at those metrics and make some, give some feedback.
It helps to align it so it doesn't get burdensome. I mean, if the produce safety of evaluation, that's crazy, but that's what FDA wants. But make it usable, and that it will encourage these lead instructors to actually use it. Sometimes they say, "Oh, I don't want to." They want to go home. We don't want to give them too much stuff to fill out.
Yeah.
So looking closely at what information do we really want, and we are willing to analyze and summarize and present.
I agree.
How do I capture that, Luke?
We don't want,
short and
I forgot
sweet.
what I said.
They keep it short and sweet.
Short and sweet, and don't ask too many questions. Do we really want to know what? Do we really want to know what?
We did. We went through that because first we put everything in that we wanted to know.
Yeah.
And then we said, holy smokes, this is really long.
Yeah.
So then we went through each question and just we're like, do we need this? Do we want, and it came down to, do we need this information? Would it be interesting to know, or do we need it? And we tried to focus on the information that we really want to measure that will be beneficial, not just periphery information.
And thinking in terms of, you want to write this up, you want to get it down, you want to report it. You don't want a 16-page document like PSA. What do you need?
Okay, but we're not too. is it fair to the evaluation tool is that is completed, right, Nicole? And the ask
Yeah,
was
but
that we
now
use the same tool.
but with this FSPCA assessment, it might mean a reevaluation of the tool. So I will talk to Elizabeth Newbold and find out, because I think that, going through NECAFS to get at the FSPCA is maybe more successful. I don't know. So no, I see a nod.
I don't know, Nicole. You tell me. If you have a secret entryway, you let me know, because
I don't. So let's look into
I
this
get a
and
bit of a
find out.
wall myself. But
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. We can. I certainly have different avenues, I think, than you guys do. So we could do that.
I mean, we
Are
could
we,
start
are
with
we
Martin.
allowed to talk to Mark directly?
I don't.
From Penn State? Is that his first name?
Martin.
Martin.
No, Martin.
Well, that's all right. That's what I was looking here too to see as a shout it out.
No, I knew it began with an M. That's what
Martin.
happened when you retire.
Yeah.
You remember certain.
Well, I guess that's the thing, Luke. Is it possible? Martin is part of the FSPCA curricula improvements, right?
Well, I think, yeah, and I think you could get an assessment from him about what their timeline is and how far along they are, because maybe they're not, it just came up and they haven't really fleshed it out. Is it going to be strictly knowledge questions, or are they going to drift into other ones? And so we wouldn't want to.
Well, this kind of goes into some other things, though, that we didn't have a chance to discuss yesterday, though, is, and I don't know if it bundles into evaluation. I'm kind of thinking it would, but the other thing that Martin was talking about is the not Martin, but the FSPCA is strategically thinking about refining the preventive controls training. And I think that's an exciting thing to mark, but I am a little concerned that for smaller processors, if you have had food safety training, then this program is a little bit redundant, right? There's repetitive components. But there's a balancing act of, if you are really fresh from this and have no experience on this, the reiteration components they help reinforce some of these concepts. And so I am a little concerned of pruning out some of these stuff to be more efficient may also dilute the learning for those that are in higher need. Does anyone else feel that way, or is it just me?
You can always add it back in if you felt they pruned it too much, I guess, although that's more work. I don't know. I guess I just figured, we'll see what they do.
So it kind of goes back to me. It seems, though, that a thing that we really, like, in the past, we've talked about having a stronger regulator presence in NECAFS, and that's been a challenge. But I think now that we're well established and we've got stronger game plans, maybe we can strike now and make that a stronger goal for the future. But the other one that seems like that's been a bit of a deficiency is having a stronger working relationship with the FSPCA. So I guess one I want to say is this a feeling that we all agree is true? And looking at some.
Yes, it is.
But I saw another, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I'll wait till you're done.
Well, no, hit it now. What you got?
But then now I'm starting to see some more familiar names involved with things. Like Martin is a familiar name involved with FSPCA, and I saw Ben Chapman is involved with them. And so I'm wondering if we can try to get access through these familiar names to our group.
Exactly. So that was kind of exactly where I was going, Nicole, is, all right, well, I mean, we already lured Martin in our network. He's been here a couple of times, and he's a Northeast partner. We have to talk to him, but is it reasonable to see if we can get folks like Martin to act as a NECAFS, NECAFS FSPCA liaison? And as part of that work is they have to actively report back to us the progress of these things and making sure that the voice of the small, our target users are heard in these decision-making components.
Amanda, are you talking about decision-making components as it relates to the development of the curriculum? Or the
I'm talking about the assessments, some of the curricular revisements, those components, based on yesterday's conversation, Lori.
So I can see maybe the assessments. So I'm on the curriculum committee for the seafood HACCP stuff. for this curriculum there, and we make changes and we do it. And so, so we have our group, and then we stay within our seafood HACCP group, and we align things with the guidance document, new things that come up, but we just do it. So I think you just need to make it clear what you want as your role.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to review everything they do, I'm not sure that will go over very well.
I don't think that that's actually
So
from
that's
my
what I'm
perspective. Yeah. So I appreciate this, Lori, to help of you're on the other side to know the administrative side. I'm kind of stirring the pot here, hoping we can have a conversation about it. For me personally, I thought I loved Martin's talk yesterday, and it gave I'm hopeful that it will be a continuous improvement of thoughtful curriculum, and I think obviously that's the intent. But a part of me is thinking, oh man, what type of assessment is going to be deployed, and will it be sensitive to all of the participants or not? And how do we make sure that it's accounting for the audience that NECAFS serves?
No, I understand what you're saying. I'm just.
Do we know if there's a comment period, by the way, when they actually are about to finalize this?
Like I said, with seafood, there's no comment period. We make the changes. We've made the changes. We're on the 4th version. I can't remember. We just make.
What if the 4 regional centers, Lori?
We do those. What?
Lori, what do you think about maybe the 4 regional centers get together and write a letter in supporting the reassessment, but would like to be at least part of understanding what the final draft's going to be proposed?
Or maybe like a pilot program, sort of, where they vet the new curriculum.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how they respond. They haven't been. They appear, from what you say, haven't been open to things before. I don't know why. If you start saying we're going to start checking your work, I'm just thinking that maybe there's got to be a different. I know what you want to do, but maybe there's a different way that we can do this without sounding like we need to interfere because we have some concerns about what you're doing, and that's sort of what. So
I do know. Yeah, it's like coming to the table late and be like, "What? We're having steak? I'm vegetarian." Like, dude, you knew we were having dinner 2 years ago. But I do think since the edits haven't been done,
I
appreciate. I think it's a good point.
I think it's worth the try to see if we can plug in somehow.
Well, maybe not the whole group.
Maybe, no, I don't. No,
maybe
I guess
we ask whether somebody can sit in as a representative.
Yeah.
That as part of that, and to make some suggestions. So it's like sort of like a non-voting representative. I don't know how to say it, but so that there's just one. Just one, and we're not asking for the whole curriculum to go out for re-review. We're not asking for them to do everything we want them to do, although I think it would be a lot better if they did. But I'm just saying, maybe there's one person that feels so inclined and could do it, that we could ask whether there could be a NECAFS representative involved in the modification of the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
What was that, Beth?
Do they have plans to pilot the changes to the curriculum?
They do. I asked that question yesterday, and Martin said they will have some pilot of some kind.
So I think it's definitely worth it to at least be involved in that to some extent, where we can at least participate in the pilot.
And that's your chance to provide feedback, right?
Oh, that might be. It might be a little late then, Luke. But they're only going to make so many changes.
Yeah. I think this brings up some bigger ideas about some of our efforts. And it seems, I guess this is a question. Is this a different working group, or is this something that we could fold into evaluation? Because
Hmm.
I think it could go either way. Does anyone have comment on that?
I think it still fits into evaluation. I'd be also happy to help out in making some of that connection if possible, and maybe trying to reach out to the other regions to sort of get a collective approach, collaborative approach to that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So it would be important to kind of regroup with the other regions to see if anyone else has.
Yeah.
I don't want to say, to Laura, your point, I don't want to say that's a concern, right? Of like, oh man, like, I'm excited about these things. I just think it would be helpful to make sure that the NECAFS community is involved. And to your point, I don't mean like all 40 of this group do it, but I have some liaison or representative involved in that process. And whether it's presumptuous to see if Martin could be that role, but that might be an option as an example, but we're open to some other ideas here. Okay.
Yeah, I think just leave it under evaluation too.
Okay. So does anyone have anything else that they want to discuss about needs or opportunity or actions within this curricula stuff pertaining to evaluation work that we can put in the notes? And let me just check the chat. Sorry, I'm sharing my screen. So now I have a few different places I gotta look. Is there anything in the chat that I need to look at?
But there's the two issues are the changes to the curriculum, and then there was the assessment. Those are two separate things, right?
Yeah, but they
Okay.
they impact one another, particularly if we're gonna deploy assessments. It would presumably come within the
They may come at
evaluations.
different times, though.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So let me just take a moment here. I had a couple notes. So I'm going to circle back here to the resource group. Actually, I have two angles I wanted to discuss. One is the resource group, and then specifically kind of calling out Andrea to kind of help us remember about the work that we have from the needs assessment, so that we can kind of, if you all remember, Andrea yesterday gave us a hit list of some of the key topics within the needs assessments of development opportunity. So kind of reflecting on that and thinking about the trajectory of where our resource group is there any work that we want to think about specifically as we start establishing new goals for the next year? So let's see, in my notes, let's see, Beth, you had indicated yesterday allergens and environmental monitoring programs, HACCP type trainings and pest management were some of the resource opportunities for the future. Is that, did I capture that correctly?
So not entirely. So I think we were lacking resources for allergens and for environmental monitoring programs, as well as some resources for sanitation SOPs, but I think Annie found some additional, but I think she could still use some more in that area. But what we identified for the HACCP and pest management, those are two categories that we just didn't have as separate categories, but there are a lot of resources for them that were captured.
Thank you.
So
good thing you're here. Is there anything else that folks want to think about in terms of resource gaps that we know of? And then just to reiterate what Carrie had said about identifying our knowledge gaps and using that as a strategy for the future is going to be an important one. But based on what we know now, those are two that we want to make a focus on, right?
and I think it'll be interesting too, because the breakout sessions yesterday, I haven't looked at everything that people came back with. So I know that there will be more, the more resources were identified for sure. So that can be included. So.
I agree. I think one of the important parts too about identifying gaps is formalizing that process and putting together some sort of framework to make sure we're doing it effectively. But as for what that looks like, I really haven't started to consider that.
Yeah.
I think that is a great one. What is the process we use to formulate the gap assessment?
Yeah, survey. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great one. Okay. Andrea, can you kind of help us remind us of some of the key points from the needs assessment that we had from yesterday's summary?
So what stuck out to me most is that of the regulators we surveyed, they were not as enthusiastic about the effectiveness of training compared to everyone else in the survey. But when I dug deeper on those regulators, it showed that the regulators that responded to the survey did not work as closely with small processors as a lot of the other survey responders. So we may not have received responses from the right regulators. And also, we only had regulators from half of all NECAFS states, even though we did receive responses from we received at least one survey response from somebody from each NECAFS state. We only got regulators from New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Maryland, Vermont, Massachusetts, and West Virginia.
Okay, so what do you think is a recommendation here? You talked about yesterday considering doing another survey with that, right?
Yes. So identifying the regulators that interact more with processors, because this round we did not get the right regulators.
Well, that overlaps with our communicators' effort to find regulators. Who is the person or persons?
Should we be looking at specific persons, or should we be looking at, like, there are regulators in here? I saw Sean is here. Or should we be looking at sort of like positions? I mean, these people come and go, you know. I'm a little concerned about seeking out specific people, and then all of a sudden they move laterally and they're not the people that we'd be reaching out to. So would it be better to identify someone almost in charge so they can tell us who we should be talking to? I don't know the right way to do it, to be honest with you.
So finding the offices for each state, because they're called something different in each state.
Yeah, I'm not, you know, Andrea, I don't know whether you have a good, I wouldn't know what the best approach would be. So if you say, okay, John Doe is in there now.
Mm-hmm.
In 6 months, Jane Doe is in there. And then we're reaching out to the wrong person. And does it get to that person when we reach out to them? I'm not sure the right way to do it. So,
but you in that state, you have your ear to what's going on with the regulatory agencies. So that state communicator could keep track of those things.
Not really, Luke.
Not really. Yeah, I understand, because they don't tell you anything, right?
You know, no, I mean, all of a sudden, you know, you find out that, oh, he's gone. I didn't know he left. So, I mean, so I just the way, just, I don't, the ideas are all good. I'm just trying to, you know, when you get to right down to what's the final approach you should take.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think it's a good point, and I think it'll vary by state and state size, and I know in Rhode Island we've experienced some of that, and I think generally speaking, I think some of it just comes from, like, as relationships become more established, I think it'll improve that ability to know if there is a change, who the best contact person is, because I think a lot of times that can fall through the cracks when there's a shift. And I think some of it is at the regulator agencies, if someone's leaving, to make sure that as part of that transition that they're letting the person taking over who's moving into that role know, this is what I was, you know, these are the responsibilities I had, or this is the working relationship I had with NECAFS and or with other organizations, and, you know, here's a contact to keep that ball rolling. And I think another part of that can be redundancy. I think part of what I'm hoping to try to do within the Center for Food Protection at Rhode Island Department of Health is to kind of be a secondary in a lot of different areas, so that if the primary person does leave or for some reason, is not working on that for the time being, or moves to a different opportunity or something, that I can have at least that working knowledge, so that if there's a question about it, or I can talk to the person who's coming in and say, hey, I'd like to have a chat about some of the working relationships we've had with other organizations, and I think that, to help them transition more seamlessly into that. But I think sometimes if all else fails, maybe reaching out to the person who's in charge, the division director or the chief, or someone, to say, hey, I've been working with so and so. John Doe was there. I sent an email. It got kicked back to me. I'd love to have the contact information for the new person who's filling that role, or whoever would be the best person to talk to about it.
So if we have trouble in Rhode Island with one centralized Department of Health, I can't imagine what might happen in New York or Pennsylvania or anywhere where there's not only the statewide people, you've got the city and town.
Yeah.
And who do you talk to? So the statewide people may not be, so it's something that we just need to figure out.
Yeah, and I think that for us trying to, stay relevant to the regulated community has been tricky. Just, there's other priorities. COVID certainly does not help. That obviously, like, think about my work when there's a pandemic. So I don't, I'd love to think more about what type of strategies we can use to increase that relationship. And I think, Sean, you bring up a good point of, can we create some sort of who's your primary versus secondary, so that we can kind of keep traction going to increase the involvement there, for sure.
That's interesting that we have quarterly calls with the Department of Agriculture, which are good, because then you hear about who left and who's
You
there.
do?
And all that.
That's a good practice.
Yeah, but that didn't happen until FSMA came, and the Secretary of Agriculture and the Dean talked about it at a meeting, that this is important, and so it had to go up a higher level to get done. And it's been useful. Sometimes there isn't a lot to say, but it's good to connect.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe looking at different ways the state's educators communicate with regulators is an interesting survey or
So maybe
project.
that's something that could evolve from the awareness campaign, right? Setting up some sort of communication platform, where maybe it's something that they write in for the next 3 years, where maybe there's some sort of, the Produce Safety Alliance. I think you had brought this up at one point, Amanda. They do their monthly produce educators meeting. And I know regulators attend that on the produce side, as well as state extension. So maybe it's something that we ask NECAFS to write into the next project, where there's like a monthly call associated with NECAFS for the PC side of things.
I'm laughing because I do remember saying that, but I love that you remember. Go back, like circling back. Okay, so I had it up here as a comment, but I think because it was more of a processing component, but it feeds back into awareness campaign, right? So one of the actions is investigating a little bit further about what is the communication platforms within each state, right, of between educators and regulators. And then the action is some sort of communication platform. Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, so it could even be like, I think it's one thing maybe get people on like a listserv, which you're kind of starting, right? But maybe if it's like a separate like mailing list, so people can so you can send emails like through a newsletter or something to communicate, and then to actually have an actual forum that brings people together instead of just once a year at NECAFS. Maybe if it's a more monthly thing with topics specific to the needs of preventive controls for human foods, then you might get more of an audience that's coming in, and you can have more conversations and So we could do, targeted like short webinars and then have Q&As. Just to facilitate communications and what's going on, and
Great.
beneficial to everybody.
I think that's great. Sarah put in the comment here too, thinking about the survey. She says she thinks that New York did fill it out, but I don't often work directly with businesses. But I see all the reports from the preventive controls inspections and field questions from our inspectors who are doing the inspections. So she filled out the survey based on that experience. If you'd rather she'd have this done with field staff, she'd fill it out. So she thinks that could work. So this kind of brings back the conversation we had a moment ago about Andrea talking about the current work we have with our regulator, the responses we have of our survey based on the regulators. So to kind of resurface this, do we want to make that a goal this year to resurface the survey and try to get a stronger reach with regulators? What's people's folks? And I guess I'm going to take pause. Sarah, if you want to elaborate more on this, I'd welcome you to speak now.
Oh yeah, sure. The survey sounds really familiar, so I think I did fill it out. Just based on my kind of big picture experience of our preventive controls program. But if there was something, like if you were going to do it again, if there was something in the email that went out that like said specifically, we would like to have your field staff fill it out, I don't think there would be an issue with that, and I would just forward it to the field staff. Is that kind of the information you were looking for? Or?
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I'm looking at the group too of, do we think that do we want to go back and enhance our response data with the survey, or use the survey that we have now as a pulse mark and looking at the future? So I guess that's kind of the first question. And then to Sarah's point, it seems like there's some interest of being able to help to deploy that.
The survey, I don't remember the survey. What?
Yeah, you do. The Food Safety Communicator survey that Andrea fielded last year.
Oh, okay.
It's like Thanksgiving-ish 2019.
Okay.
And then we shared the highlighted responses in 2020 at last year's NECAFS. And then we got the reprise of the results yesterday with Andrea.
Okay.
But as she mentioned and a moment ago, some of the responses from the regulating pool was pretty small. And then of those that did participate, the audience of regulators aren't the ones that in direct reach with food safety communicators.
Were there any things where like the regulators really had a totally different stance than
efficacy? They just
training advocacy?
Yeah, mostly training efficacy, a bit of disagreements on logistical challenges versus financial challenges. But what jumped out to me most was that I think like the highest number for like across the board in terms of perceiving training is very helpful. Like the highest number across the board was I think like 56%, versus the main survey where people like 80% of people thought, say, GMP training was actually helpful. So that was interesting. And I was wondering if we had gotten the right regulators for that survey.
How many regulators responded?
14.
I hate to beat a dead horse, but here I go and beat it. I put out a survey a while ago, never published it. I'm bad, but I put out a survey a while ago to get a hold of seafood regulators. So that's like all over the place. And I worked with AFTO and they got it out for me and I got a decent response. So, if there's a way we can work with them, if they're willing to connect with regulators for the states that we want, I think we should, they will put it out if they're willing to. They're going to, if they put it out and ask these folks to fill it out, it's coming from AFTO. And I'm thinking AFTO as a partner, And if we partner with them, then maybe they'd be willing, if they're willing to do that, maybe we could get some more regulators to respond because it's coming from their group.
Okay, that's good.
So it means that they having a buy-in, and just they're
Who are we addressing the survey to? Boy, I just have a bad memory.
Well, first it was food safety communicators, but I think in sending it out to the food safety communicator channel, we didn't get the regulators that actually go into plants.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I guess, but it's still unclear to me though that the training component was one that had a disagreement with the other educators. And so I think Lori brings up a good point of between Lori and Sarah's perspective, there's other channels that we could redeploy the survey. But I guess the question I have back is there a need to do that work at this point within what we want to achieve in preventive controls?
What are we going to get out of reopening it up?
Mostly to resolve the issues with whether or not training is effective, or asking what solutions they have for how we can improve what we send to them.
I would include in that, and I don't remember this survey, I'm sorry, but I'd like to see it in front of me. But did you ask the question, who would be the preferred contact? So we get someone, we know maybe we got the wrong person, so they could refer it to someone else. And that helps with the communicator search. I don't know, you say communicators, but we don't have communicators. Do we yet? A final list?
No, not yet.
But,
all right.
But doesn't this have to be anonymous?
The needs assessment was anonymous.
It needs to be anonymous. You can, they can identify their state, but they can't identify anybody else. I mean, one of the things that we did on this other survey, which is, if you don't want to leave it open-ended. So if there's all these areas within the preventive controls, you could have them rate on, and maybe you did that, I don't remember, I'm sorry, but if you have them rate on a scale 1 to 5, whatever, where there seems to be some issues and where more emphasis needs to be made in terms of training, instead of saying is training effective, let's drill down to, is it the record keeping, is it the environmental monitoring? And maybe that's what you did. I don't remember.
Yeah, we asked that of lead instructors, but there's no overlap between lead
instructors. You want the regulators because they have boots on the ground. So, where do they see most issues? And then they can just rate it on a scale of 1 to 5. And I thought that FDA had to, or maybe they don't, I don't know, had to give some sort of report that sums up some of the deficiencies in terms of some of what they inspect. But that's FDA, that's not state. So if we ask them those sorts of things, specific questions, rating 1 to 5, we can get good feedback as to where they think that more emphasis and more outreach to small business really needs to happen. So is it GMPs? Is it, like I said, record keeping? Is it environmental monitoring? Is it process control? Do they know what corrective actions are? Just ask some specific questions.
Okay, so as being sensitive to time of this conclusion, this has been really helpful. As an action item, I'm going to task that let's see, I had it as a general component of this needs assessment, right? And I don't know if that would go back into resources. I guess with the action I'm having here is re-exploring if we need to do this or not. I think is a conversation that we can't make today, but we can at least put it on the docket of work that we want to think about for this year. Does everyone agree in that? And how and or why will be fleshed out as we regroup on these notes. Is this a fair, just looking at the group here, and if there's any comments further on that topic? Okay, so as we wrap up this session, I just want to thank you all for participating and kind of recap what I heard here is, one, there was full agreement that we would keep our 3 platforms: awareness, resources, and evaluation. But within them, there's a couple different goals that we want to further explore. So specifically within the awareness group, action items is being more strategic about what type of working list we have that itemizes organizations and our hit list of who can help us penetrate those groups, both state and nationally, to help get the word out on some of the awareness tools that we have being built. And also explore the communication platform of what we have between educators and regulators. And there's some ideas about maybe creating new platforms like they do in the produce world, or reevaluating how we can do that. Within the resource group, having a formal process of how to identify the gaps and strategies in filling them using some sort of system is one of the plans, and one of the highlights is being thoughtful about what type of resources could be built in the future for allergens and EMP. And then the evaluation group, our summary was more about thinking about how to align more strategically with the FSPCA as we're starting to deploy this new evaluation tool. We're anticipating that refinements might have to be made, because if and or when assessment tools will be deployed with the FSPCA, we want to first understand what those are and have a voice at the table to make sure that our small processors are not that are affected or are being accounted for, and making sure that the metrics are not too exhaustive, that it doesn't disrupt our end program evaluation deployment. Did I articulate that correctly? Does anyone have any amendments to this?
Sounds good.
Perfect.
All righty. Well, then this concludes the working group session, and thank you all for your input. It's fun to talk food safety with y'all. We are on break until, I believe it's 1:30, right, Annie? And so we regroup at is it the live session? Oh no, it's a virtual Zoom.
Yep.
So we have that Zoom. So just be careful that we're going back to the Zoom that we got distributed earlier this morning. So thank you all.